Hello, Ravid. How are you?
I'm really good, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, thank you for being here and welcome to the show. And we're really excited to hear everything about you and the inspiration behind Embie. And would you mind, just to kind of orient us a little bit, would you mind, just sharing us a little bit about you and your background and certainly we'll get into a lot more as it pertains to your startup and whatnot, but just, orient us a little bit to who you are.
Sure. So depends on how far you want to go back.
Yeah.
But I started out as a creative. I used to
Oh,
sing
cool.
and songwrite
Oh,
and
that's
worked
so amazing.
at a
Yeah.
record label since the time I was about 18 years old.
Wow.
Uh, I worked for one of the major record labels in the States and started out when things in the digital world were called new media. So that
Sure.
really did
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um, before anybody really knew what it was just something new, and you kind of did a catch-all of everything. And I was a project manager for artists on the digital side, and then things
Interesting.
grew really fast.
Yeah.
And I became the first head of mobile, which then was like
Hmm.
the first ever, when iTunes first came
Sure.
out, when videos, like back when you did WAP pages, which
WAP.
is like
I remember WAP. Yeah.
which is just a responsive website now,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
So all of those things and really grew with it all. Was there for 10 years, was then the head of all urban music.
Hmm. I
And
was just
then,
going to ask you what genre you focused on. Yeah.
yeah, so I did urban and pop,
Hmm.
a lot of hip hop
Cool.
on my side. And then after 10 years with the company, decided to go and do things on my own, got my first taste of entrepreneurship with a cosmetic line and
Oh,
then
very
a
cool.
bath line. And then went through my own health struggles, which a lot of the times when you talk about women's health, something tragic happens and you
Yeah,
have
and,
to
and
go
unfortunately,
yourself.
but it becomes the catalyst for, what you're trying to accomplish, right? Even though it stems from very unfortunate circumstances.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Behind every women's health startup is a tragic story, is how I
Unfortunately, but
like
true.
to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and so I had my own tragic story with
Mm.
endometriosis, and
Yes.
then trying with my fertility, trying to freeze my eggs, learning I would
Mm.
need IVF, going through 8 IVF cycles. I do now
Wow.
have a 3-year-old. I'm a single mom
Mm.
by choice, and out of all of that stemmed Embie, and really was the uh, needing to find a solution for myself is what
Sure.
inspired creating the first initial product.
Hmm.
So our our first product, which I took my 401k plan out
Yeah.
during COVID, and I was pregnant, and I said, okay, I need to find a solution for everybody. And if and data to me was a big driver of how you make decisions, at least
Sure.
in my life. And so I would go online and women would share information with each other, but none of it was in a place where you could organize it and
Yeah.
actual
Curate it. Yeah.
results,
Sure.
drive results. And so I said, okay, what if I create a tool that allows you to manage the entire administration of
Mm.
fertility treatments, which is a really heavy burden
Sure.
anyhow. But then that allows us to create a tabularized database of everything that's going on with women around the world, which treatments are working, what's not working, allows them to adhere. It becomes a tool for them
Sure.
to adhere, community and everything else, but we get to gather data around it,
Right.
which doesn't exist in that kind of
Elsewhere.
way at the time. And so that's what we did. And our first product has had over 75,000 women in 120 countries
That's
that have
amazing.
used it all organically and free. And so we do have lots and lots of data now, and we can even show that the use of the app increases success rates and reduces cancellation rates. And then we're like, okay, well, the clinics should be using something like this, right?
Right.
Even just utility that's allowing you to be more organized and then more successful. And we tried to connect with different EMRs, tried different strategies, and it just wasn't moving forward. So we just
Mm.
said, let's just build a completely new operating system for fertility clinics where we can now have this amazing experience that we've created for the patients, also on the clinical side,
Right.
and see how we can create a completely, like, close the entire loop and create a connected care type of experience for both
Rather
clinic
than
and.
in like an integrated care experience. Sure. Yeah. So it's so interesting. This does affect me a little bit personally. What my best friend, she is a single mom by choice. She also went through IVF. As her way to do that, she decided that she wanted to have a child and entered into IVF. She lives in a big city, right? And I think probably had a lot more resources available to her by living in a large city, both from a support perspective as well as just choice of clinics and choice of providers, right? And you're really kind of pioneering this remote fertility management sort of experience. Does the idea, Ravid, of people living out, more rural settings, not suburban settings, not necessarily like in a major city like my friend, is that part of what you're trying to accomplish with
Yeah.
the sharing of information?
Yeah, so I mean, in the US alone, there's the majority of would-be fertility patients are in fertility deserts where fertility
Yeah.
clinics or satellites
They just don't
don't even
exist.
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's only 1,900 REIs, which is reproductive endocrinologists for infertility in
Mm,
the United States that are working, and they are the ones doing the majority of treatments. And, at any given time, 20% of the reproductive population will need fertility treatment. So
mm,
there isn't access to everybody,
sure.
both for geographical reasons and for cost. It's a
Mm,
really high cost. I
mm,
personally moved abroad, so I could afford it. Otherwise, it
right.
would have cost over $200,000 to have my child. And so there's all of these things that are creating a bottleneck and increasing the prices because of supply and demand, right?
Right.
A lot more demand than there
A lot
is
more
supply.
demand than there is supply. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we've done is we're able to create the infrastructure for remote teams where now we can utilize, there's over 50,000 OBGYN offices
Mm.
in the United States, still not enough
Still
in
not, I was
certain.
gonna say that number sounds so unbelievably low, right? When you think
Yes.
about a population of 400 million people.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's still
Yeah.
not enough. Still in certain counties, it's definitely below what
Right.
is necessary for the population, but it's a
Sure.
lot more than the
Right.
1900 that we were just talking about. And
Right.
so how can you utilize some of those OBGYN offices that already have ultrasounds, that already have
Hmm.
the ability to do some of the diagnostics that are needed around infertility, that are able to do some of the lower
Right.
level treatments like ovulation induction and IUI? How do you get them into a network like a fertility hub network where they get to use the resources and back and forth and work with the REIs in order to manage some
Mm.
of these things, so that when you're going through IVF and you're doing monitoring, you don't have to travel hours
Sure. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
in order to get to the clinic if you're in one of these fertility deserts. So that's some of the things that our tech enables. And then
Yeah.
in addition to that, as things continue to evolve, we already have the infrastructure with at-home monitoring,
Mm.
right? So different ultrasound companies are now coming up with at-home
Right.
ultrasounds. We can actually measure the follicular sizes if you know things about IVF and
IVF.
IUI.
Yeah.
You can do that now at home,
Sure.
send that imaging and the information to the doctor. Well, you can't do that at home yet, but it's
Right.
coming.
It's
and
coming.
when you
Yeah.
will, and when you will, when that is available, we'll have the infrastructure and the ability to go ahead and do that right away and implement it and put it into the market on a larger scale, because women are already using our application, patients,
Right.
and then we'll be using the clinic side of our product.
That's I know there's a lot of advancements in these handheld ultrasonic devices, these small portable devices. You talked for just a minute, Ravid, a little bit ago about a little bit about the product development process. You talked about that, kind of moving away from EMR integration to something that was more of a connected care experience. I have to assume that that's been a little bit of an uphill battle for you folks, right? Just because, the EMRs are kind of like that single point of sometimes failure, but also just the single point, right? That the providers themselves want to utilize. Talk to me just a little bit about that process that you kind of walked through to move away from that, to move to connected care. I know ultimately you are drastically improving operational efficiency for fertility clinics, as well as all of the sort of remote access problems you're trying to solve. But can you talk us a little bit about how, the development of the suite of products?
Yeah. So when we went out and we said, hey, Portability Act for is coming out, and
Yeah.
everyone's going to have to adhere to FHIR
Hmm.
and give us, and we'll
Yep.
be able to access the data that we've been wanting to access. And we went down the road of trying to figure out how do we do that
Mm,
but you have to have a BAA anyway. It can't just
right.
be the patient.
Yes, always have to have that
To
BAA. Yep.
say,
Yep.
yeah, the patient doesn't get to say, well, hey, that's my data, so give me the portability into where I want it to go. It
Right.
still has to be a relationship that you have to have with the clinic no matter what. And
Sure.
then it turns out that oftentimes the EMR were only doing that for specific types of data,
Mm,
like pathology, for
right.
instance, because of the fact that the pathology labs were already working with APIs. And so
Mm,
that enabled you to be able to get that
have
data
that
anyway.
connectivity. Yeah.
It had nothing really to do with the EMR specifically themselves. And in a
Mm.
lot of specialties, what you'll find is that some doctor went out and called his buddy who was an engineer from university and was like, hey, I have this idea that I want to create my specific specialty, like an EMR for it, and here's
Right.
how it should be,
Right.
right? And
Yep.
so suddenly their
Expert.
solution was, I get to have all of my data. It just so happens to be all in PDFs, right? And so so we're still lacking
So
the
working through some of that.
ability,
Yeah.
yeah, the ability to grab the data that we need in order to
Mm,
have it in the app. And so suddenly the patient is having a better experience
sure.
and is able to graph their data and compare their treatments and doing things within our application because they're manually putting it all in versus what is happening on the clinic side. And it's not like it's
Mm,
not possible, right?
sure.
The portability, the APIs, the HL7, they can do it. It just takes a little bit of extra work and thinking around the infrastructure,
Sure.
which if for the majority of EMRs, specifically in this specialty, were created in the early 90s. And
Right.
so
So
they
they're a little bit, they haven't
yeah,
evolved. Yeah.
they haven't evolved. And
Yeah.
so they haven't been able. And so that all like was through the process of discovery with the different clinics who did want to start using it and we couldn't
Mm,
do it. And
right.
because it was, well, we can't give you the functionality if the EMR isn't able to give us the information. And
Right.
so,
Makes sense.
and even then you're creating like drainage of efficiency with what you're trying to do
Right.
with
Because now
EMR
they're using
with
double
all of these
systems or
workarounds.
workarounds. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so how do we get rid of some of the different point solutions that are needed because they're all centered around the patient's
Hmm.
care? How do we get
Hmm.
the data in a way that actually allows for not just the patient to view it and look at it and be more informed, but for the clinic to
Yeah.
create better decisions, have better care flows, understand where their efficiencies and bottlenecks are so they can improve. And so it was like, okay, then we need to just create it all
Yeah. Create the whole new
ourselves.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
The whole new thing and so yes, that makes it a lot harder
Right.
because especially in the US, okay, an
Learning new
EMR,
things and yeah.
yeah, and now I have to learn all about like
Yeah.
revenue cycle management
Right.
and the payer system and what goes in as a claim and what happens with denials and things that I never thought I
Yeah,
would
because
have to
there's so
learn
many
as a product
pieces that
person.
associated with that that are beyond your core expertise, right? Like you said, rev cycle management, I'm sure, scheduling and appointments and insurance
Those things are easy,
verification
right?
and
It's things
yeah,
that we know,
yeah,
like if you're a product person and or just an entrepreneur, you're looking at your schedule every day and you're
right.
optimizing in certain kind of ways and you're
Mhm.
connected from your Gmail to your
Right. Your
Calendly.
phone to this.
And
Yep.
so you
Yep.
know all of those things, and I know all of the things that I need as a patient to coordinate my care that
Correct.
I was already doing,
Right.
right? And so I can make some assumptions, but like understanding the fact that I now need to have, as a part of this encounter, have it completely be coded
Hmm.
with CMS numbers and CD10s, and then have that go into someplace else so somebody else can code it, then they send it over here, and it's just this entire web
Right.
of complications, right? The American health system never fails in
Never
making
fails.
things
Yeah, absolutely.
complicated.
You've had an interesting walk. You were an entrepreneur, like you said, and then you became a patient, right? And then that, of course, experience as a patient led you into another entrepreneurial path of Embie. We talked a little bit about some of the technical challenges that are associating you right now. But those are surmountable, like you've talked about, right? You folks can work through those, Ravid. But I'm sure there were other challenges, non-technical challenges you faced pioneering in this field. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges and what you're doing to overcome them?
Yeah, I think in the very beginning, it was a lot of, we, we did think, okay, if we can't go to the clinic, we want to go direct to consumer, or we
Hmm.
want to do Like you always think, okay, now I have the data, I'm going to build some algorithms on top of that, and I'm going to optimize things.
Sure.
And then when you talk to people professionally about it who are in the system, they're like, what does a patient know about any of that stuff? And like, there's a lot of respect earning that has to
Yeah.
be done along the way to have other people take you seriously as somebody
Sure.
who may know something
Sure.
about something, right? I think that was one of our biggest
Biggest
challenges.
hurdles. Yeah.
Yes, because yeah, it's medicine. It's like science. You want the science that's behind it.
Sure.
You want to be able to prove the efficacy. And so when a patient comes in and says, "Hey, I think you can do this better," it's like,
Mm,
okay, well, maybe you know about the patient side, but what do you really know about the efficiencies in the clinic? What do you really know about
right.
my day to day? And so that's been one of the things that has been kind of amazing to me to learn all of that and like interview and work with
I was just going to
now.
ask you, have you kind of solved that through more of a human-centered design approach, like contextually interviewing folks, observing their work? I'm sure you're doing all that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So we've gotten design partners and even potential partners who just like that somebody was listening to them, where we don't know
Yeah.
whether they're become the
Sure.
customer, but suddenly somebody wants to solve a problem that they know that they have.
Right.
And so just really immerse ourselves in the problems for
Hmm.
the clinics to understand it better. And some days when I do now demo for physicians, then they ask me where I went to school and
Yeah.
where I did my fellowship, and I'm just
Right.
like, no.
You're like, I didn't. Yeah. I'm an advanced consumer.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, it's a running joke, right? Again, in women's
Yeah.
health, where like you have to become your own doctor
Yes, you
sometimes.
do. Well,
You get a
and
doctor in
you know,
something.
I do want to talk to you a little bit about that, but you know, obviously, because women do have to become their own doctor to a certain extent, right? And there's a lot of misinformation that's out there, right?
Mhm.
Are you seeing that as part of of another struggle of just trying to help people shed the bias and the misinformation that exists? I mean, because look, the internet is a vast, unchecked place, right? And so talk to us a little bit about what you see there, and does that make you optimistic for more for what you're doing, or do you see that as like a wall that you're running? Are you running into that wall of sort of misinformation?
So there, one of the things that we built for the patient side
Mm,
is this engine that essentially, depending on your diagnosis, your BMI, your medical history, and then also like the treatments that you're having, the day of the treatment, the type of
mhm.
medication, like everything is served to you. It's kind of a coach that's serving you information based on your data. And
Good.
so for that, we have to create over 5,000 insights. A lot of it is based on the science and
Mm,
about things that are out there. But in fertility treatment specifically, there's a lot of things that are introduced on a regular basis that
sure.
haven't necessarily been around for as long, or you don't know if that's going to be the thing that really helps you. And when you're desperate for a baby, you're sometimes willing to do things where it's like, is that going to give me just a 2% more chance or a
Right.
5%? I don't know. And I'm going to go and spend the money in order to
Do it
do that.
anyways. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is garbage.
Yes. Well, that's what
Way
I'm
of
talking about,
putting
that
it. Yeah.
misinformation. Yeah. Yeah. And people
Yeah.
who
And
are
so
preying on the vulnerability and the emotional states and those things, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes even the people who are right, like who did that study and what
Right.
were they actually trying? What were
Who,
the
yeah.
results they were trying to
Follow the
get?
money behind that study, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
often what we're able to do is then say, okay, well, here's what the study says, and this is who it was by, but then here's what our data says. And our
Mm,
data of actual women that are putting in the
right.
results
Real
of what
life
happened
experience
because they
data.
use it is not following
Right.
the scientific studies that are out there. And so I'm not telling you what's right and what's wrong, but I'm going to give you the information so that you can make a decision for yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, that's really where we try to fit it in. This is okay, this is the normative, this is what happens. And if something we don't have something that where there's a consensus
Mm,
on it, then here are things that you should be at least asking
sure.
questions about. So we don't try to help you, we don't steer you towards a decision, we don't tell you what's right and what's wrong. We
Right.
tell you the information that's out there and you get to do that on your own. And we hope that we filtered a lot of the junk out there. And if you
Mm.
still want to ask those questions, we have a vibrant community where you can ask other women what their experiences were as well. So
Are
But you definitely
you
do have to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. I've only started personally to kind of dig in more to these real world experiences and RWE data analytics. Sounds like, you guys have been there for a while. Are you optimistic about that? Ravid, do you still feel like there's still a lot of work that needs to be done about the quality of that and talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. So anytime you're relying on humans, you're going to
Mm.
have some sparse data where things may be missing or
There's
not all the
holes, right, in the data. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. Hopefully you have really bright data scientists that are working for you,
Hmm.
like we do, where they can fill in some of those holes and
Right.
understand we
Build
are
the
still.
inference and things that they need
Yes,
to build. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
And so things that I don't know anything about, um, but my co-founder Donna sure does. She's our CTO, and
Awesome.
so we're hoping, that the hope is that we can
Yeah.
create sites out of this. And so we've done that. We've done the POCs that can say, okay, this cohort of women has things that are similar about
Yeah.
her. Like I presented a study just last year about women with endometriosis who are going through
Mm,
infertility and what are the markers that we see along the way, that versus like what's been published in the past. And so I do think that obviously as we gather more data that's actually coming from the clinic and we can compare that against the data that we have coming in from the women, we have a unique perspective
mm,
in the market that has both sides where most people don't. They rely on either, okay, the data that the clinic is putting in or the data that a patient is putting
sure,
in. And
sure.
it's very rare to measure both.
Mm. Ravid, if we switch just gears just a little bit, I want to talk to you about something that's maybe a little bit more personal, right? In that, being a female founder is hard enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all know there's an inherent bias with female founders. Um, Now you're in a space that is fertility, which is a female founder in a space focused on female medicine. I don't know if you guys are looking to raise money or if you have raised money. Yeah, okay. Because a lot of times when you're trying to raise money, you're sitting across the table from guys that look like me, right? And you're talking about fertility and IVF, and unless they personally have gone through it with their partner, they it's like they don't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about, that the personal aspect of this for you as a female founder in the fertility space and maybe some of your more memorable experiences there. They could be good or bad, right? I know a
Yeah.
lot of young women who listen to this show, Ravid, are looking for inspiration or they're looking to understand if they think they can do what you're doing, right? Do they have with what's inside of them to not be afraid and go do what you're doing, right? Um,
Yeah.
Anything you would want to share there? I know it gets
Sure.
more personal, so
No, no, no. I think it's okay.
yeah.
I think the most honest thing I can say is that I haven't figured it out,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
As far as like how to raise money from VCs and have them say yes, like it's been like I've had the experience as a solo founder, female founder, which you almost never want to be. Like,
Right.
go get
That's
yourself
a
a
tough
partner,
spot to be in.
female
Yeah.
or male. Go
Yeah.
get yourself yes, and then the kinds of things that you hear from VCs is that, oh, that sounds like the place where women go to complain, or like
Right.
things that have absolutely
Yeah,
nothing
that's
to
just
do
going to be like
with bringing in
like
their own
a Reddit
biases,
for
right?
like fertility. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, wait, did you see all my slides about the data?
Right.
But yes, but it doesn't necessarily matter to somebody who's already bringing in a bias. And I
Right.
think my biggest thing that I've learned, like I'm almost like 4 years in to
Mm,
building this, and is to ask yourself, like, who are you looking for validation from, right?
yeah.
Obviously, like when you're a startup and you need to raise money, and so sometimes when you look at the traditional story, that might mean VCs,
Sure.
and there's so much between like entrepreneurship and then VC backed enterprises, right? Like VCs expect you to be a unicorn, they expect you to
Yeah.
be a $1 billion company, or they
Right.
can't invest in you.
Overnight.
But
Yeah.
so many businesses in the middle between being a small business to being the unicorn that can get funding and can be really impactful and can be really good. And those are the questions that I ask myself all the time. Like, okay, when VCs say no, or maybe our market is not a unicorn because it is only like 20% of the population. I mean, that's
Right.
a huge number, but it's
Right.
not to them.
Right.
Like, like, does that matter to me?
Right.
And will that change my course? And what is actually important to me? And
Mm.
so I'm not looking for, hey, VCs, I'd love if you would give me money, but it doesn't validate the need for this tool, for this product, because it's
Right.
needed and it's
Right.
there and it's important and it's purpose and it can make a lot of money
Sure.
for somebody. And so to really consider where you're looking, like who do you need to get the money from? What kind of business do you want to be? That not everybody needs to be that unicorn, and we may not, and most people don't ever get there, right?
No.
Most companies never ever get there, but you can still be successful depending on what you're chasing. And if
Right.
you're chasing sometimes that VC dream, you may not get to your dream at all.
I
And
really appreciate what you just said there, Ravid, about like what are your end goals and what are you trying to chase? I worked with a founder a while back and it seemed like the only thing that she was focused on was to raise money, right? And I would say to her, the money's important and you need to raise money, but that can't be your end goal. Right? And I do think it's easy to get mired in that and that the raising of funds becomes what is your perceived end goal and it gets and it's all consuming and you actually forget that no, we're actually trying to do something here that's impactful to the field of fertility or fill in the blank here, right? You know, the problem that we saw in the market that we realized no one was solving that we decided to go solve somewhere along the way the raising of capital became the goal rather than the mission of the company, right? Seems
yeah.
like a slippery slope for sure.
No, it definitely is, and I think that there's a lot of work that can be done for female founders and for impact driven type of ventures to find some sort of
Sure.
venture in the middle, right? You're not going to be private equity backed right away. Is it family funds? Is it just angels in the very
Right.
beginning? What does
Friends
that
and
look
family.
like?
Yeah.
And what does it keep looking like if you do need to keep getting venture, and that there needs to be some sort of new model that's
Right. That
created
emerges from there.
where
Yeah.
yeah, I really do think, or otherwise we're not going to get
Just a
like the
cycle.
smart people in the
Yeah.
room to invest their time and
Yeah.
efforts into these things,
Mm.
and
It,
it's going to hurt everybody
it
eventually.
just becomes a bad cycle. No, I agree. Or it's already a bad cycle. It just gets it goes
Yes.
from bad to
It
worse.
goes worse. Yeah, exactly.
Speaking
Exactly.
of friends and family, Ravid, you know, who's your posse? Who's your village that's helping you through this?
So I probably would not be able to do any of this without like my parents' help. They
Mm.
also moved abroad after I
Oh,
had the
that so
baby.
everybody moved. Yeah.
Almost everybody except
Yeah.
my sister is still in Los Angeles. And
Mhm.
so but yeah, it was they helped me. They pick up my kid on what is considered Friday night in the US, and he stays there one night and I get one morning where I don't have to
Morning
wake
where you
up.
can do what you need to do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that's but I wouldn't be able to
Sure.
do any of that. And my kid is just the most comfortable like 3-year old ever. Like he
Awesome.
gets it and he's very proud and he tells everybody what his mom does, and
Aw.
he lets me do Zoom calls when he's home. So he's very understanding, and
Sounds like he's very mature for his age and yeah, yeah,
yeah, he's
yeah,
always been, and he's
yeah.
been there for every step of the ride, like
Right.
from the tummy to everything else.
Everything, yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, and yeah, and my co-founders, you know, this is a really hard journey, and so
Mm.
you have to do it together. But I am in a different country than where I've been for the majority of my life,
Yeah,
even
well,
though
that's a whole other part
technically
of
I
it
was
too,
born
right? I mean,
here.
you're not only you're culturally it's not extremely different, but it's still different culturally, right? So I'm sure
Yeah,
you're
it's
still
this
navigating
entire
that and
village. Yeah, so I lived in
yeah,
the States for 28 years of my life and then
yeah,
moved here 6 years ago.
right.
And yeah, so you leave, it's really hard to make friends in your
Yeah,
adulthood, right?
right.
And
Terribly
so
hard.
I would
Yeah.
say, and so I'd say like, yes, so that I have still friends at home that I talk to on a regular basis, and
Mm,
I've made some friends here, but it's just not um that, I don't know. I think for me it's yes, it's my family, my
right.
kid, and like the drive that you have in yourself in order to keep going, because a
Yeah.
lot of relationships, when you only have the capacity for family and this new business, it's really hard to sustain completely new relationships unless they just completely get you because
Right.
they're
And
like
they have to kind of click in, right? To
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
but a part of the process for thinking about having a child as a solo mom is to try to figure out how do you do all of that and how do you balance all of it?
Mm,
And so I think that sometimes just with that choice, with having that choice and you're choosing it, then it's
mm,
a lot easier to navigate because there's
right.
no expectation of anybody else. And so I'm just grateful
Yeah.
that
No, that
we
makes
have
sense.
that.
Yeah, that makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense. When you mentioned earlier some of the, some of the major initiatives that you've continuing to work through with MB. What
Mhm.
are some of the big milestones that you're pushing towards right now, Ravid? Is it um, a larger user base? Is it more clinics? What are the next big milestones you guys are pushing towards as
It's
we
our
are still
first,
pretty
yeah,
early in 2024?
yeah, it's onboarding our first US customer.
Nice.
Essentially, like we had pilots that went on in the UK, and we have patients who are using it all over the world in
Mhm.
120 countries. But um, being able to onboard US customer one, two, three, according to our plan.
Sure.
And that will also then go right back to the venture funding because you're expected in the seed phase
Sure.
when you're in tech to have customers in the
Right.
US already that are paying. So that'll help with that as
Mm.
well, so which will be the next milestone after
Okay.
that with our seed round.
I'm actually a mentor for Mass Challenge Israel.
Oh, okay.
In addition to being a
Wait,
mentor.
so do you know Josh that way?
No, no, actually, interestingly enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But is that on your horizon, or do you guys feel like you're kind of past the accelerator, point here? It sounds like
So
you're well past
yeah,
that, but yeah.
so we're definitely well past that.
Yeah.
So my co-founder and who is now CEO, Josh Gottesman, was
Mhm.
actually the head of programming at Mass Challenge Israel for
Yeah,
six
I
years.
don't think we crossed over there,
Um,
but yeah, but either way,
no,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
got it. So yeah, so for reference and context, he's the
Yeah.
one that reached out to
Small world.
Richard.
Yeah.
Yes. So and but we have done as a company eight different programs, like
Oh, wow.
including Google Health AI, Microsoft's AI
You've been
for
around
Good.
the block. Yeah.
Well, the reason is because again, in a new country, I had to create a completely new network, and so I
Yes.
looked towards these programs to create communities for myself. And so yeah, so long as they felt good bringing in a
Mm.
female founder, they
Yep.
believe in the mission as well, then I got to increase my network and be around a lot of people. Like one of the first big programs that I did was like a Meta's health growth
Oh,
program. Where it
cool.
was just like really where all of the founders there were like second, third time
Mm.
health entrepreneurs or founders for startups, and the median rate I was still self-funded for my 401k plan, and the median
Unbelievable. Yeah.
rates for all of those companies were like in the 8 to 12 million.
Sure.
And I was like, wow, and I have more users than them. And it was just really interesting to see like how different people make things work. But it
Yeah.
was a really great experience for also that community building,
Mm.
being with other founders and just really finding your space, like where do you belong?
Sure, sure. What is speaking of, you have more users than them. What is maybe, without getting into a lot of specifics, Ravi, but what is your economic model? How does it kind of work? Is it free for use for the users, but then there's opportunities to get paid through the providers? How does it work for you?
Right. So for on the direct to consumer side, we do offer the majority of the app is completely free from the
Mm.
utility perspective. But that tool, that engine to walk you through and hold your hand through the entire process, that's a upgrade. And
There's
so
a
there's a
there's a
for
freemium
that.
aspect to that. Yep, yep,
Yes, exactly. And then, but the majority of what we're going to be doing is from the B2B side.
yep.
So for the clinic, we're creating a completely new operating system that
Right.
includes their EMR, all of the patient
Rev
experience.
cycle management. Yep.
Exactly. And so on that part where it's on a per cycle basis, so on
Hmm.
a treatment cycle. So
Okay.
pay for this IVF, this FET, this IUI, and that's how it would work.
Excellent. Interesting. That's a different pricing model than I would have thought, but I'm not as educated in this space as you
No,
are,
no, no,
right? So
I'm
yeah.
always open.
Yeah.
What would have been your
Well, I
thoughts?
would think just, more of the subscription-based software as a service type model, not, but I know it's different, like you say, as you're thinking through the different cycles, right, of the experience
Yeah,
there.
so the
Yeah, yeah.
reason we believe in that model, not that everyone else does at the moment,
Sure.
it is something that we're trying to fight through, is because we don't believe that if infertility, if you're going to base your model off of those 500 clinics in the US, your
Right.
market is going to be really small. If
Yeah.
you're basing it based on your REI, it's going to be small. But where we believe the growth is going to come is from the efficiency. You're going to be able to do more cycles with
Sure.
those same
Yeah. Yeah.
with the same
See
clinics.
more patients, serve more needs.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, if we're enabling the
Yeah.
increase in those cycles, we want to benefit from them as well, which is
Yeah.
why it's on a cycle basis, at
Yeah.
least the thinking currently. As you know, those models change.
They do change.
Mhm.
Clearly, this is passion for you. It's very personal for you. You've become, you've got your fellowship now in fertility medicine, as you mentioned. Um, you're pushing through boundaries, and I'm curious, Ravid, what continues to motivate you to push through those boundaries, continue to drive innovation in the field of fertility management?
It's still the patient.
Still the
That's
patient.
still,
Yeah.
yeah, it's still like who's in my heart and
Yeah.
who, like, I want to make sure, like, our solution starts and ends with the patient. There's a
Sure.
lot of efficiencies for the staff in between, but like in the end, like, I don't want anyone to have to go through 8 cycles to have
Yeah.
a baby.
To
I
have a
want
baby.
them
Yeah.
informed. I want them to be optimized in the
Mhm.
best way possible, and they shouldn't need to be a doctor to get there. So like the accessibility to care that we can create,
Mhm.
the increase in outcome, that efficiency, that's what, and all of that for the patient. Like if I could have like a ticker behind me that's like these many babies born because of Embie, like I could look at that and just
Oh
be
my
proud of.
gosh, wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah,
Yes.
wouldn't that be absolutely amazing?
Yes,
I love that idea.
that's the key. That's the
Yeah,
key to what keeps us going.
yeah. Ravid, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us the story of MB, to tell us your story, all your inspiration behind doing what you're doing, the journey that led you here. We really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to see MB come to the US and get your toehold in your first clients. And I just wish you so much success because what you're doing is so very important.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me and all of the insightful questions and just being here for the community that you're building. It's incredible. It's
Thank you,
not
thank you. We're real proud of it, and we're gonna keep doing it. So, but and I know you're gonna keep doing it too. So, thank you again, Rudy.
all right. Thank you.